Good afternoon and welcome to this digital event. My name is Claudia Pauletti and I'm a Senior Scientific Officer in EFSA. Over the last 2 years, I have been the Program Manager of the program ensuring EFSA readiness for the Transparency Regulation, which will come into force on March 27, 2021. It is my genuine pleasure to introduce and moderate this conversation with our Executive Director, Bernard Url. We will spend together a bit more than 1 hour going through a very rich agenda. But first, let me explain why we are here today. The reason is very simple. In just a few months, on 27 March 2021, the Transparency Regulation amending the General Food Law will enter into force. Indeed, following the fitness check of the General Food Law and the demand of the European citizens for more transparency, the European Commission proposed a targeted amendment of the General Food Law, which resulted in the Regulation on Transparency and Sustainability of Risk Assessment in the Food Chain, known more shortly as the Transparency Regulation. This new regulation introduces a series of novelties, focusing on increasing transparency in the risk assessment process, increasing the independence of studies used for the risk assessment, making the EU risk assessment more sustainable, and developing coherent risk communication. I'm sure you wonder how this new regulation will affect you. And today, we will precisely address this question, and we will introduce the new legal requirements and the new procedure for agri-food business operators. We will start introducing the Transparency Regulation and its 4 pillars. Then we will explain how EFSA operations will evolve in the future and how you, EFSA stakeholders, are affected by the change. As you will learn shortly, the breadth of the new regulation goes beyond the sphere of applications. However, because the Transparency Regulation introduces a series of provisions that will translate into novel requirements and administrative procedures for business operators, today we will focus on these. But let me be very clear, we will not get into the details of the new procedures and tools. This will be duly explained in a dedicated training program that will kick off in January 2021 and that we will present later during this webinar and promoted in the days to come. I'm sure your interest is high, but before we start, allow me to draw your attention to a few housekeeping rules for this meeting. On the bottom of your screen, there is a chat box dedicated to the technical issues you may experience during the meeting. If anything goes wrong, please drop a comment in this chat box so that our technical service can help you. The chat box on the right side of your screen instead is open for your comments. However, let me underline once again that today we will not address technical questions which will find an answer during the training program for external users that will start in January. Finally, I wish to remind you that this session is being recorded. We will make it available on our website shortly after this event, together with the materials that we will present during this meeting. And now, I think we are ready to start. So, let me welcome EFSA Executive Director, Bernard Url. Welcome, Bernard. Well,
ciao, Claudia.
The very simple fact that we have reached 500 registration in a matter of only 2 days, and the fact that you are here with me today are signals of the great importance of the topics we are going to discuss this afternoon together. So I would like to start immediately with the first question to you. What would you like the participant to take home from this webinar today?
Thank you, Claudia, and Thank you for having me today, and welcome to all of you who are following this discussion remotely. As you said, it's really great news that this webinar reached its maximum capacity in just a couple of days. This tells us how much interested you are in learning what's new and in understanding what's due to come once the transparency regulation enters into force. And Claudia, in your opening remarks, you explained why we are here, basically to illustrate the main innovations brought in by the transparency regulation and why we do it now, to help you, our stakeholders, to get ready for the changes applying as of March 2021. But before getting into this discussion, I would like to invite you to step back and look at the bigger picture for a moment. And I was asking myself in the preparation for this webinar, what is the real goal of the transparency regulation? And I would say, basically, it is to increase the trust of the European citizens in the EU food safety system. That's the goal of the transparency regulation. And for us, for EFSA, it means if we want to be trusted as EFSA, we first of all have to behave trustworthy. This means we must be open to answer questions, we must be understandable, and we must be inclusive, which means we have to work with our stakeholder. This means, for me, looking back, the transparency regulation is, as you said, in fact, a result of the refit exercise of the General Food Law, and in addition to that, the European Citizens' Initiative to ban glyphosate. During the refit exercise, done after 15 years of Regulation 178, it was found that the General Food Law is fit for purpose. That was the main outcome. However, it also identified areas where work needed to be done, such as more coherent risk communication. And it found that we also need to address public perception that there was sort of a lack of transparency regarding the evidence, the studies that EFSA uses in its risk assessment. And more transparency was also one of the main demands of the European Citizens' Initiative Ban Glyphosate, which the European Commission acted on with the introduction of the transparency regulation, which then went in record time through Parliament and Council. And for us, for EFSA, the transparency regulation enables us to do exactly that, to make a leap forward in transparency. It allows us and it obliges us. It's a double-sided sword. It allows us, obliges us to proactively make available an unprecedented amount of data to the public at an early stage, and therefore it brings a high degree of public scrutiny into the risk assessment process. Now, you may ask, okay, all fine, but what is in for me as a business operator? And you may think that the transparency regulation comes with additional administrative burden due to many novelties, databases, public consultations, and so on and so forth. And I understand these potential concerns, and in a way they are partly true. There will be new processes, and there will be new tools to be used and to be complied with. But I think if we look at the broader picture, the transparency regulation is not only a challenge, it's also an opportunity. It will, I'm convinced, it will further increase trust into the EU agri-food chain. And this is something that I think is also benefiting our business operators, because a trusted European food system means also a higher likelihood of creating new business opportunities and building better relationships with consumers in the EU and beyond. So I think trust in the food safety system was one of the reasons why Europe is a champion in exporting food. It's not only the quality of our food, the diversity, the tradition we have in Europe in producing food, it's also partly the reliability of the European food safety system. And to achieve this outcome, the transparency regulation introduces novelties that will further improve our risk assessment process, but it will also require you, the business operators, to comply with new provisions in practice. And what we want is that you, our stakeholders, you are informed of the changes that applicants and business operators will have to comply with after the entry into application of the transparency regulation. We also want to make sure that you receive adequate training and support to comply with the new procedures. So to sum up, what I would like you to gain from this short webinar, what I would like you to leave differently after this meeting, is to be better informed, but also to feel reassured that we will provide you with the tools, with the information and the training that you will need and you might need to be ready for the changes that the transparency regulation will bring. We really need you to be on board. We need to have you on board of this journey towards more transparency. It's one of our deep convictions that only by working together we can be successful and achieve the goals that at the end were set by the legislators. Claudia.
Thanks, Bernard. Well, you set the expectation for this meeting very clearly and very well. We have a very broad audience listening to us, and possibly not everybody is familiar with the details of the transparency regulation. Can you explain what is the scope and the ambition of the transparency regulation?
I will try. If I had to answer in just a few words, I would say the main objective of the transparency regulation is to increase the transparency and the sustainability of EFSA's risk assessment processes in order to increase public trust in the science that informs EU policymaking. I think that is the core. Increase transparency, increase the sustainability of our processes in order to increase public trust in the science that informs EU policymaking. And this, well, quite ambitious goal will be achieved by implementing a series of measures that on the one hand will increase public scrutiny in the risk assessment process, and on the other hand will make EFSA's operations and risk communication more efficient and more effective. We are working hard on that also our processes are becoming more efficient and more effective. The basis of the transparency regulation rests on 4 pillars. The first pillar is transparency and confidentiality. So it means proactive publication of data early in the risk assessment process, and it gives us a positive list of reasons for confidentiality. So that's the first pillar, transparency and respecting confidentiality. The second pillar is quality and reliability of studies. So there will be a notification of studies database. We will offer, upon request, pre-submission advice. The Commission will do fact-finding missions in the member states, and in exceptional cases, the Commission can task us to do verification studies. Then the third pillar is more directed towards EFSA. It's about governance and the sustainability of our operations. Governance means that finally, also EFSA's management board will be aligned with the general approach that all European agencies have, which means our management board will be composed by representatives of all member states and the European Parliament and the Commission and stakeholders. It also means, under this precursor of sustainability, that we will have financial means to increase our collaboration with the member states. And we will be able to entrust parts of our risk assessment work to organizations in the member states. And last but not least, a very important point is risk communication. That was one of the outcomes of the refit exercise, that risk communication in Europe is not always perceived to be coherent. So the Commission is tasked to come up with a general plan for risk communication to go exactly towards more coherent risk communication between 3 actors: the Commission, EFSA, and the member states.
Wow, what you described, Bernard, is really a huge change for EFSA and its operational ecosystem where EFSA fits. Now, if you had to summarize the impact of the transparency regulation in few words, what would you say?
Well, I would say impact is increased transparency and accountability. We see transparency not as an end in itself. Transparency is a means so that others can hold us accountable. And this will be increased by the transparency regulation, which I find good. And also there will be more public scrutiny towards the data, the methodologies we use, via us, EFSA, releasing an unprecedented amount of data for the public to be able to see what we do, but also to be able to reproduce our risk assessments if, for example, academic communities have the means to do that. So that's one impact. The second impact is what we expect: increased quality and reliability of the science through sharing and receiving data during public consultations, through more checks on the data provided, and through conversation with the applicants on the requirements of the different vertical regulations. Thirdly, the impact is sustainability and harmonization. We are put in a better position as EFSA to come forward with our European Union risk assessment agenda via creating partnerships, ecosystems with our member states partners. So it will be a bigger exercise, not only EFSA, we will federate in also the resources and capabilities of the member states. And finally, there will be more coherent communication about risks, taking into account also societal needs and very tailored public engagements with our stakeholders.
Well, this is a huge change, not only for EFSA, but certainly also for its stakeholders. How were stakeholders involved in setting up these new processes, and what should they expect in the future?
Yes, you're touching a very important point, Claudia. It's about engagement with our stakeholders. It has been key to define not only the content of the transparency regulation upfront, but also it is extremely important when it comes to translating the letter and the spirit of the law into concrete processes and tools. And this process of engagement started much earlier than today. We started a dialogue with the interested partners already at the beginning of 2020. We have dedicated platforms since then. We have guiding principles also on how we engage with the stakeholders. We talk about independence, transparency, openness, inclusiveness, flexibility, non-duplication, and we do that in accordance with the engagement framework that we jointly agreed and aligned with EFSA and DG Santé. Now, in this process of engagement, we have come to the most substantial phase of this dialogue, because the practical arrangements of how the law has to be implemented, laying down the new processes, it has just been shared with stakeholders and member states who have been able now to provide comments and ask questions, which we will consider before the finalization of the practical arrangements. And while our engagement continues in these different platforms, it's now time to expand our outreach. We must ensure that all stakeholders across the Union affected by the transparency regulation are well informed and prepared for the entry into application of the new processes, which we are now fine-tuning with discussion platforms with stakeholders that we have put in place. And from my perspective, the event of today inaugurates, so to speak, a new phase of this process. And this will culminate in a quite extensive training program for external users, primarily business operators, kicking off in January 2021, with a series of thematic webinars that will explain the new administrative procedures introduced by the law, and will also show the tools that we will deploy to ensure as smooth as possible and efficient compliance with the new legal provisions. Therefore, the first 3 months of the next year will be dedicated to bringing all stakeholders up to speed on the details of the tools and the processes. Then there will be a key milestone. And we are counting down to that milestone within EFSA. It's the 27th of March 2021, the entry into application of the transparency regulation. This is when the new processes and tools become effective. However, this is not the end of the story. After March 2021, other important elements introduced by the transparency regulation will see light in the years to come. We will develop, as outlined, a new partnership ecosystem model with our member states partners. The general plan on risk communication will be set up. EFSA's new governance model with the management board will kick into place. And we will also have to improve continuously what we will start in March 2021.
Werner, you outlined the many changes ahead and how the interested parties have been engaged. But now I think we should really focus on business operators, thinking also about the audience in this room that is listening to us. What will they have to do to comply with the transparency regulation, and how EFSA will support them? To answer this question, let's first watch together a video we prepared together, summarizing the main novelties for business operators and applicants. So if we may have the first video, please, that would be great.
The Transparency Regulation has introduced a series of new requirements affecting stakeholders in the area of food and feed applications. To ensure effective interaction with its interested parties, EFSA has envisaged a set of processes and dedicated tools to comply with the new legal provisions. Applicants and stakeholders can interact with EFSA using a dedicated portal, accessible from the homepage of the authority's website. If you are a business operator, the portal is your gateway to most of EFSA's services for applicants. From here, you can easily notify studies, ask for pre-submission advice, or request technical support. If you are a stakeholder or a citizen, the portal allows you to participate in public consultations, ask questions, or submit a request for public access to documents. The portal has different navigation paths for business operators and stakeholders. To access your dedicated section, you must log into the portal with a personal account. Click on the Login tab. If you do not have an account yet, choose the option, Not a Member, to be redirected to the registration form and get your access credentials. Complete the registration form with your contact details and the details of the organization you represent, including your affiliation category. Then, submit your registration to receive your login credentials. To reset your password and access your account, simply follow the instructions in the confirmation email you will receive shortly after submitting your registration. From the portal, business operators can request a pre-application ID and create a new study notification in just a few clicks. This section is only accessible to business operators. To create a new study notification and request a pre-application ID, log into the portal as a business operator and click on the Pre-application Activities tab to create a new pre-application ID. By doing so, you can create a draft version of a new study notification, which can then be completed with additional information, such as the starting date of the study, the name of the laboratory performing it, and other details. When all fields are filled, the study can be notified to a laboratory, which you can select from the tool's database. Once submitted, the status of your request will be marked as notified. The selected laboratory is requested to approve the new study notification using the co-notify function. When this action is performed, you will be informed that the new study notification has been accepted. By choosing a different section on the portal, it is also possible to submit a pre-application for renewal to create a list of intended studies, according to Article 32C of the Transparency Regulation. After the evaluation process, EFSA will provide advice to the applicant through the same tool. Through the portal, applicants may also request pre-submission advice from EFSA. To do so, use your business operator credentials to log in and click on the Pre-application Activities tab of the portal. Then select a pre-application ID from the list and click on the New Pre-submission Advice button on the top menu. Complete the form with the necessary information to create a new draft request for pre-submission advice. Then, retrieve your draft request to review and complete your details before submission. When you are ready to lodge your request, click on the Submit button on the top menu. The tool will confirm the successful submission of your request. When this step has been completed, the status bar will change to Submitted. EFSA will analyze your request and provide pre-submission advice in accordance with Article 32 of the Transparency Regulation. You can retrieve EFSA's pre-submission advice in the section, Pre-submission Advice Outcome. From the portal, stakeholders and citizens can ask questions to EFSA, or participate in public consultations. To ask a question, click on the Ask a Question button and fill the form with the requested information, including your personal and contact details, the type of request you are submitting, and the food domain to which it relates. When the form is complete, submit your question. EFSA will address your query within 15 working days.
So, after watching this video, which provided a lot of different information, is there anything, Bernard, you would like to stress?
Yeah, well, Claudia, the video introduced, I think, several innovations, at least from our perspective, in terms of procedures and tools. And basically, we aim at making the risk assessment process more transparent, as provided by the legislation, more sustainable, and also more efficient. And I think that's also important for our stakeholders. And in implementing the different provisions, we have tried hard to engage with our stakeholders as much as possible to make the processes and the software and the interfaces as user-friendly and customer-oriented as possible. If you allow me a few thoughts about some highlights. General pre-submission advice. You will have the possibility to request pre-submission advice from EFSA on the applicable rules and content required for the relevant application notification. So this is something new which we hadn't had before. The process, I think, is a good step forward. It will decrease delays during the validation of applications and provide more certainty also for our applicants. Then there will be a notification of studies database, another requirement given by the law. So EFSA has developed a new tool with input from stakeholders and laboratories that will serve as sort of a central platform where both applicants and laboratories, contract labs will notify planned and intended studies to EFSA. And I think we can already say, and it's good that we had this feedback, that the tool has been perceived in a very positive way by stakeholders and laboratories during the testing phase. Then also new is e-submission. There will be two different systems for the time being for e-submission. One is with the common food safety authorization portal of the European Commission. So for all non-pesticides food areas, EFSA, in collaboration with DG Santé, developed a dossier submission system that will make it easier and more effective also for you to compile the dossier, and also according to the templates and let's say the templates that will guide the process. So this is one e-submission avenue towards EFSA and Santé, and the second one for pesticides is the e-submission IOCLID form, where we have developed a e-submission form following the IOCLID logic, so to speak, specifically for pesticide dossier submissions. We have done this in close collaboration with ECHA, European Chemicals Agency, who basically hosts the IOCLID software. And also we have collected a lot of input from stakeholders and member states, and also done testing together with stakeholders and member states. And then finally, last but not least, very important, we have created a dissemination portal. We call it Open EFSA, where it will be possible to follow the life cycle of an application or a mandate from its submission until the adoption of EFSA scientific output. That will be much easier and much more interactive in the future. So Open EFSA will feature sort of a timeline with past and future milestones of the risk assessment process, from where you as user, you will be able to retrieve all information concerning your application in just a few clicks. So there are many innovations. I think they are good for EFSA, but I'm convinced they're also good for stakeholders and the business community. These are only a few highlights of the feature of the new tools and processes we have designed. Obviously, we will provide detailed explanations and demonstrations during our in-depth training program starting as from January. Already now, I would like to highly encourage you and all interested parties to enroll into our training program.
Thanks, Bernard. And before we move on, I see that we are receiving some questions already from the floor, so maybe we can take a couple if you agree. One question is, will laboratories outside the EU, for example, even the UK next year, need to give notification of studies?
Well, I think it's the way this will be handled is wherever the European Union has an agreement with a third country, sort of a, I call it now a trade agreement, this will be extended also to third countries. For countries where there is no such agreement for the time being, the European Union cannot enforce this notification from third countries.
And then there are other two questions. I think we can take both. The next one is, will the pre-submission advice outcomes be made publicly available?
Well, I'm not completely sure now how this is laid down in the practical arrangements, but there will be a public announcement about the content of pre-submission advice, because the pre-submission advice is not going into scientific details. It's a pre-submission advice about the applicable regulation, the legal framework, and the administrative processes that have to be complied with.
Exactly. And then there was a third question, which was if the material that we are showing, so for example, the recording of our conversation and the video, the first one we have shown already, will be made available. And the answer is yes, it will be available on our website shortly after this event. I will get back to this point towards the end of this webinar.
Okay.
So, after this first video, we have learned a lot about the new tools for the notification of studies and the pre-submission advice. What is also important for applicants is to understand how the application must be submitted in the future. And to explain that, we also have a second video to explain how this process will work as of March 2021, when the transparency regulation will come into force. So maybe now I can call for the second video focusing on application.
After the entry into application of the Transparency Regulation in March 2021, business operators will submit their applications through two different tools, depending on the scientific domain of their application dossier. Pesticide dossiers will be submitted through Euclid. All other dossiers will be submitted through FSCAP. Euclid and FSCAP will make the e-submission of application dossiers easier. Let's discover the main functionalities of both tools. Starting from Euclid. After you have defined your mixture composition in Euclid, you can access the substance dataset. Click on the active substance name beside the substance icon and you can view the table of contents. The table of contents can be expanded to view the studies in the dataset. The studies are reported in OECD harmonized templates. To view the study, expand the sections in the left-hand table of contents until you see the sections with an orange circle. Click on these sections to view or edit a document. If you already have a substance dataset, the relevant studies will already be included in the table of contents. Euclid allows the reuse of studies in different working contexts. If you would like to amend the template, you can open each of the sections and fill in with information. It is also possible to attach a full study report and its sanitized version to the template. You can use FSCAP to create a dossier for submission. To do this, you have to pick the food domain, the authorization type and the application type. This selection provides a unique link to the template for the table of contents of the dossier and the process that this dossier will follow when submitted. The template tables of contents have been co-designed by EFSA and DG Santé to ensure that all information required by legislation is included in the dossier. At this point of the application, you will be required to add data or attach documents for each heading in the table of contents. When uploading files, you can indicate if you wish to request confidentiality treatment. When doing so, you will need to provide a detailed justification. Once the dossier is submitted, it will be forwarded to EFSA for completeness checking, risk assessment and confidentiality assessment.
So, this second video has given you a flavor of how application will have to be submitted in the future, meaning after March 2021 when the new regulation will come into force. I want to reassure our audience that a lot of the details that you will need to understand and know will be provided during the training sessions that are foreseen starting in January before and until March when the law comes into force. So let's have another look at the chat where maybe we can take a few more questions. I see that there are several questions on the transition phase and how this will be handled, what type of support people will receive. And I think, Bernard, here we can reassure our audience that we will provide all the necessary support. Maybe you want to say a few words about that.
Yes, as you said, Claudia, there's one is the training session that we will have, and we will ask also the participants of this webinar, but also the bigger community of stakeholders to submit questions so that we can fine-tune and focus the training especially on your needs. So it will not be only an EFSA-made training, it should be sort of a co-created training so that we can support you in the best possible way.
Okay, we will tailor it basically.
Yes.
And I see that there are several questions regarding on how to register to the trainings, but I think this we will address later in our conversation. So we will come back to this point that I fully understand is fundamentally important. We have learned about the transparency regulation and the many changes ahead for business operators and applicants. We touch many aspects, and I'm sure that now participants would like to know how EFSA will support them with the transition toward the new operating model that will apply as of March 2021. Maybe we can go a bit more into the details, and Bernard, you can elaborate on this aspect.
Yeah, thank you, Claudia. And we have seen already in the questions that there's of course a lot of need also for further information for managing the transition period, managing the change that is needed from where we are now towards the new reality after March 2021. And I just want to reassure our stakeholders, also the business operators, that we have engaged with stakeholders throughout the whole implementation process, and we are committed to continue to do so. So today, what we could give to you also in the videos, it's a very a sort of a snapshot, a very short snapshot, a glimpse of the new processes and procedures that will apply as of March 2021. And also you've seen in the table of contents for submitting applications that we only could give you a very rough overview about the new tools in FSCAP and in IOCLID. And of course, we cannot cover this huge amount of information and transformation that will be needed. And I think we cannot shy away from saying that, yes, there will be a transformation, and this will need efforts from our stakeholders, from the business operators, but also a lot of effort from EFSA, and we are ready to provide that. Of course, we cannot do this in one webinar. And that's why, from our perspective, today marks just the kickoff, so to speak, of I call it now a change management process that will come up with a training program as of January, as said, and that will provide detailed information and support and practical guidance for a smooth transition to March 2021. And also with our training program, we continue to stand firm in our commitment to engaging with you and to supporting you to meet the requirements of the new transparency regulation.
Yes, exactly. And maybe you can explain a bit more how can stakeholders find more information about the training program, which I think is of key interest, how to enroll in the session, and how to submit technical questions on the new tools and processes.
Yeah, thanks, Claudia. What we will do is right after this event of today, we will announce our training program on our website, which will feature, amongst others, the following thematic modules. There will be a module about guidance documents update. There will be a module about notification of studies, pre-submission advice, and application renewal. There will be a module about submission of applications in IOCLID for pesticides, and for sure a module about submission of applications in the FSCAP environment for all domains outside pesticides. Each module will be designed to provide very practical information on the new administrative procedures and on the IT tools that will be used to support them. Also, and I think this is very important, right after this event, you will be able to express your interest in the modules of our training program, and you will also be able to submit questions already now that we will use to refine the content of the training sessions ahead of January and really tailor them to your needs. We will also notify you, the participants of this webinar, as soon as the full calendar of training sessions is online. You will receive a notification. I really would like to invite you to visit our website and make the best use of the other informative materials that we will progressively make available to stakeholders, starting from the videos we have shown today and other information that we will put on our website. I really warmly encourage all participants of today, as well as those who will watch the recording of this webinar, to enroll in our training program and submit questions and comments ahead of the sessions to help us make them as effective as possible. I think I can say from an EFSA perspective that we, our colleagues, have worked hard on setting up the processes and tools that are as streamlined and as user-friendly as possible. Still, they are new, they need training, they need time to get acquainted to it. This is the change management process. And I'm confident that all these elements that we have seen, and together with the training program, it will put us and you in the best possible position to, yes, to be ready to comply with the new provisions as of March 27th, 2021.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you for highlighting the next steps of our change management and training plan. I'm sure that stakeholders will be very interested to attend the training sessions we offer that you listed before. In the weeks to come, I can just confirm and reinforce that we will duly communicate on this, and I invite all the stakeholders to stay tuned for more news they will receive from us. We have almost come to the end of this meeting, but before I close, is there any final message that you would like to convey to the participant connected today?
Yeah, thanks, Claudia. I'm happy, I'm glad that I had the opportunity to be here with you to personally illustrate the novelties brought by the transparency regulation and how these novelties will impact us as EFSA, but also our stakeholders. I trust and I hope that all those who have followed our conversation have now at least a little bit clearer picture of what will happen soon and what is in for them. And there I come back to where I started. I think what really unites us is the ambition, the obligation, but also the desire to have an as safe as possible food system in Europe and an as trusted as possible food safety system in Europe. And there you as food producers, in the broad sense, applicants, and we as EFSA have an important role to play. I would like also to thank for all of you being with us today, and I hope you will connect to our office soon again. I see this meeting also as a small sign of EFSA's commitment to ensuring that stakeholders are engaged in a sort of a change management process that will allow, will enable, will support a smooth transition to the new operating model. If you allow me, I would also like to thank, even that's a bit to our own population, I would like to take the opportunity to thank also all EFSA staff members who are really working hard over the last 2 years to prepare the new processes. I know from our internal programs that more than 200 people are involved in close collaboration with DG Santé in many engagements with our stakeholders. We try to make it as smooth as possible to prepare the new processes and tools before the new legislation has to be applied. A lot of effort, also a lot of investment has gone into ensuring EFSA's readiness for this very important milestone in our history. And I think it's also important today to manage expectations. We have to and we will comply with the new legislation as of March 2021, but we will not be perfect. Obviously, with this huge amount of changes, there will be hiccups, there will be glitches, there will be questions, but we are ready to address them. We are ready to be exposed to them. We are ready to work together with you to make the system we will have in March 2021 better. And this is clear for me that the journey will not be over with the entry into application of the new regulation. And this is so important why we will need you, our stakeholders, on board to keep the dialogue going and to help us also to identify improvement opportunities as part of our continuous improvement processes. And the aim is to improve the effectiveness and also the efficiency of the new processes together with you. So I warmly invite you to stay tuned for the next steps and to enroll in our training program, to be ready to start this new exciting, I mean, for us, it is an exciting chapter in our history, and it's just 1 year ahead of our 20th anniversary. It's a big step forward in our journey towards an open EFSA, open science organization, a journey that we pursue now for 6-7 years. The transparency regulation helps us to go further there. But it's not only for us. It's for the whole community of European risk assessment. And at the end, it's for European citizens. And it's, as I tried to outline, it's for trust into the EU food safety system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bernard. And I would like to join you in thanking all the colleagues who have organized this session, all the EFSA staff members who are really working very hard behind the scene to ensure that we will all be ready for March 2021. I would also like to thank you, our stakeholders who attended today this session, for being active in the chat. Your contribution that you already provided and the question that you will continue to submit in the days to come via a dedicated channel that we will launch shortly will help us to prepare the training program starting in January, following a bit what Bernard was saying, that it will be co-created, tailored on your needs. Check your emails because you will soon receive an alert directing you to a dedicated web page on our website where you will find the materials we have shown you today, the 2 videos, the link to the call for expression of interest to enroll in our training, as well as the channel to submit your question. We really look forward to having you at our training session and to continue together this journey towards March 2021. I was almost going to say, like we close the meeting, have a safe trip back home, but unfortunately we're already home because of COVID situation. So allow me to just say thank you and goodbye to all.